Welcome to Education Today, the guest teacher edition. I'm your host, Solanke. After 15 years as a secondary English teacher, I stepped away from the classroom and took a 1-year hiatus. Now I'm back in a completely new capacity. I'm a substitute teacher, and I get to experience teaching all grade levels and subjects from kindergarten to 12th grade. Join me as I document my journey, seeing education through a brand new lens and a different angle. So let me tell you about this week, my ventures in substitute teaching. So I began the week in a science classroom, 5th grade science. I think I switched to 2 classes. I so appreciate the science experiment that the teacher left for these students, because usually that is not the norm. Because, and I get it, you want to come back to your classroom intact, not in pieces, and you don't want your equipment to be in pieces, missing, thrown all over the room. But I so appreciate that this teacher actually left an actual science experiment and not just bookwork or worksheets, which I know sometimes we have to do with substitutes. The kids were so engaged in this experiment, and I thoroughly enjoyed being a science teacher for a morning. The experiment involved a weight, like a spring-weighted weight. I don't know how to explain it. With a hook on the end and some elastic bands so that they could attach different size, like bolts. I'd call them bolts. Are they nuts? Are they bolts? Whichever one has the hole in it. And take measurements and do 3 rounds of this experiment, adding additional bolts each time. The kids were so invested in it. They were sitting in groups of 3 or 4, and each person had a different task. Whether your task is to hold or be in charge of the measurements, of recording the measurements, be in charge of the bolts, be in charge of the elastic band, be in charge of the scale. Everybody had a task. For the most part, that worked well. And they were asking thought-provoking questions. They were invested in the experiment. What they didn't know is that there were 2 different type of weights. Some groups have these weights where, regardless of how many bolts they added, the measurement hardly changed because the bolts were not heavy enough for that particular spring in that weight. Whereas other groups had a weight where the spring was very light. So as they were adding more bolts, the measurements were changing. So that the former group was actually very frustrated by the time they get to the round 3 of the experiment, that their measurements were the same. So what I did was, at the end of the experiment, they had a worksheet that the teacher had left to fill out for them to take the measurements for each round of the experiment, 3 rounds in total. And then at the end, there were some questions for them to answer. But before they answered the question, because I had figured out that some measuring tools were yellow and some were blue, and I figured out that they were different. So I'd switched them. I made them switch and let them experience what the other groups had. So if they had the one with the light spring, I give them the one with the heavy spring so that they could see, this one is different. Regardless of how many bolts I put on it, it's not changing because you need something heavier. And then I saw some of them saying, well, they were having this conversation. So, well, let's try my water bottle because that's heavier. And I was watching them using it needs something heavier like this water bottle. So they were having these discussions, and they were trying to use it for different items, including like the water bottle, which was heavier. And that helped them answer the questions about why do you think some groups' weights weren't moving. It was such a thought-provoking experiment. There were some good questions, and there was some good discussions, and I understand that not every teacher in every school can leave apparatus out for a substitute, depending on the culture of the school, the culture of the classroom, the kids, but also the substitute. You don't know if the substitute is going to responsibly keep track of the equipment and make sure that everything is as it should be. But it was a really good morning, and I just loved seeing that excitement in the kids. I recently interviewed this social media star educator, Dallas, the science diva, and I thought of her when I was in that classroom, about when she talked about like bringing science to life and engagement and seeing kids excited in science. I definitely saw that in that classroom this morning. So if you are able to, and not everybody is, I would encourage more teachers to leave more hands-on um, work, the kind of work that we do when we're there. So consider, if you can, if you're able to, leave more hands-on assignments when you're not here, when the sub isn't, when you have a sub. It's pretty cool. So this week was interesting. There was one day this week where I had fourth grade English language arts, and within that day I had three different classes. And in each of these classes, there was a girl, and this is not the first time I've seen this while I've been doing elementary school. Each class had one girl who seemed to believe that she was the de facto teacher when the teacher wasn't there. Perhaps even when the teacher is there. The mom, the person who tells everybody's business, the person who reports on everybody. Every class had one. And I could tell that these girls had been somewhat empowered by the teacher to have that role, because they would come to me and say, "Can I sit at your desk today?" Sometimes she lets me sit at your desk. So I'm in two minds about this particular character in the classroom. I've noticed, like, as I said, that elementary classrooms, especially like third, fourth, fifth, but even some of the younger ones, they tend to have this particular character. So I kind of want to get close to that person because she has the information about everything that's happening in the classroom. So that's very helpful to me coming in cold as a substitute teacher. But at the same time, these students have been empowered to embarrass their classmates publicly. An example would be they believe that they need to let me know publicly in front of the whole class, he's the bad kid. He doesn't stay in his seat. This one's always in trouble. She's not supposed to be sitting there. It's like they the person or the people that they call out, they'll always call out a boy, at least one boy. He's bad. He's the bad boy. He's the one who's always in trouble. And the response from that kid is twofold. It's either they're embarrassed because now she's embarrassed that kid in front of not just the class, but in front of a stranger, the substitute teacher. And they're like, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not. She's lying." But sometimes, especially the older kids, the older boys, they'll just accept it. They say, "Yeah, yeah, I am. That's me," which makes me feel sad because they're probably not bad, but they've taken on this label, and this girl in this class feels as though it's her job to publicly shame the other kids and, monitor what everybody's doing all the time. And I have a problem with that. Like I said, I had three classes that day, and each class had one. One of them just was off the chains. I mean, she was being helpful to me in some ways, like let me know this, you need to do this at this time, and this needs to happen. But at the same time, there's the public shaming of her classmates by telling their business to me and to everyone else. She was wearing mascara as well, this particular one, which kind of threw me off for a fourth grader. I mean, I don't know. I have all boys, so I never had to deal with the makeup thing. But I don't think that I would let my kid wear makeup at that age. I think I would have waited till middle school. But she was wearing mascara and kind of made her look a little older, but in a weird way, not in a pleasant way. It was like, she's just a fourth grader. Why is she wearing mascara? But anyway, she thought she was the mom of the classroom, monitoring what everybody's doing, reporting on everybody. He's not supposed to be sitting there. She's doing. Oh my God. There's a lot of people pleasing behaviors there, I believe, that girls who want to be please the teacher and be the teacher's pet. I know there was one time where some of the boys, these boys were not bothering me or anyone else. It was the boys that she'd already told me and told the whole class, they're going to be the biggest problem I'm going to have because they're always a problem. So after the work was finished, the teacher left a note that they can either read quietly or do a particular assignment on a laptop. So these boys decided to read quietly. One of them asked me, "Can I sit over there?" And I was like, "Sure, we'll see how this works out." And a friend went and sat with him. A few other kids went to sit on the rug too. There's like a rug, and there was a chair that was supposed to be like a safe chair, I guess, that nobody's supposed to sit in unless, I don't know what the circumstances where you can sit in it. But they were sitting over there, and the thing is, this is the thing, they were reading. They were actually reading, and they were talking to each other, and they were reading. It was like, those Captain Underpants kind of books. But they were reading. They were not bothering me. They were not bothering anyone else. And a few other kids sat over there. There's a little group of girls. They were a little off task at time, but they were reading. If they were on the computer, they were doing whatever they were doing on the computer, not bothering anyone, have finished their assignments, and now either quietly reading, having a little discussion, not bothering anybody's life. This girl, the mascara girl, decided that she wanted to go over to the rug too. She was a little upset because one of those boys, who's the naughty boy, was sitting in a chair that apparently nobody's supposed to sit in. That bothered her. And I'm not a fool. I know that if the teacher had been there, those kids would not have all been silent reading on that rug and on that chair. They would have been in their desks reading. I'm not a fool. However, they were not bothering anyone. They had finished their assignments. They were reading. But she decided she wanted to go over there because I guess she didn't like the fact that things were happening out of order or out of control or whatever. And then came back to report to me a few minutes later that he did so and so to me. Like, I don't know what he did. Like, maybe he told her to, like, leave me alone or something like that. Or maybe he said shut up, which isn't nice or whatever. But she reported she'd gone over there. She'd said something to him or done something, and she came and reported him to me. And I said, you know what? If you went back to your desk, you would not have a problem. So I suggest you leave them alone and you go back to your desk. And she went back to the desk, and a boy on the other side of the room said, wow, that backfired majorly, didn't it? Which tells me that class is used to that girl reporting on people and getting her own way. That the normal thing that happens in that classroom is that she would have made that report and those boys would have been in trouble. And that boy's comment, well, that backfired majorly. I feel like she's never been told, stay out of people's business and go and sit down. Mind your own business. Shocking. There was another one later that day there were two boys in the class who were being silly, tapping each other, mild horseplay. I'm like, just stop touching each other. Then they line up to go outside because they have to switch. It's time for them to leave my classroom and switch. And they lined up outside where I am. And they're touching each other and horseplay and laughing. This girl, the girl in this class, this is a different class. And like I said, every class has one girl. This girl decides to try and break up the fight. Stop fighting! Gets in the middle of them. Stop fighting! And I'm like, they're not fighting. Stop fighting! Stop fighting! She comes to me and says, I tried to break up them fighting and I almost got hurt and I almost fell down and I was just trying to break up the fight. And I'm like, but I'm watching them. They're not fighting. They're literally horseplaying, like mild horseplaying, two boys. But she is convinced that they're fighting and she had to go and break it up. I don't know what her business was there. She had no business there. But anyway, they move from the classroom that I'm in. This is outside now. They start moving towards another classroom, waiting to be able to go into that classroom. And those boys are still being silly. And this girl is like, stop fighting. And the kids are like, fight, fight, fight. I'm like, they're not fighting. I've worked in a high school for 11 years. I worked in a middle school for 4 years. I have seen fights where people's jaws were broken. I'm not saying that fight needs to be to that extreme, but by no means were those two boys fighting. So now they've moved a little away from me and they fight, fight, fight. And I get the class to calm down and stop saying fight, fight, fight. The only reason they're saying that is because that girl keeps insisting that these two boys who are just mild horseplaying and just goofing off are fighting, and they are not fighting. But anyway, the noise from what they're doing, because they're a little bit further from me now, is such that it brings out another teacher who's in a classroom who comes out and says, fourth graders, what is all this noise? Well, this girl, hysterical, they're fighting. And I'm like, they're not fighting. That is not a fight. It's nowhere close to a fight. But she was hysterical. They're fighting. I try to break it up. They're fighting. So then this woman marches these two boys off to the office because she didn't see anything, but based on the report of this girl, they're fighting, which they were not fighting. Not even close. And I was like, wow, she is a Karen in training. These two boys were marched off to the office because she believed that they were fighting, even though the teachers told her several times, they're not fighting. Leave them alone. I will take care of that. I'm telling them, stop touching each other. That's all they needed was stop touching each other. You stand here and you stand here and stop touching. That is all that needed to happen. They did not need to go to the office. And I said to them, she is Karen in training. But there's also the possibility that she's not a Karen in training, but that was actually a trauma response. Perhaps she sees fighting in her house and she feels, that she needs to stop it, even if it's not really fighting. Maybe she's seen her dad beat her mom up or whatever, and maybe she's just the thought of anything turning into that, it causes so much anxiety within her that she needs to stop it before it even gets to that point. It's possible that that's what's going on with that girl, or she could just be a Karen in training. I'm not sure which one it was, but that really bothered me that those two boys were marched up to that office and they were not fighting. But again, that could be a trauma response in that girl. I think it is good and it is nice for these girls to be given a role in the classroom. Perhaps they're more like, perhaps they show leadership qualities and, they're very independent. However, there needs to be boundaries because they're not the teacher. They're not the matron of the class. They're the same age as their peers. They have no business disgracing their peers and putting their peers' business out there to substitutes, to visitors to the classroom, to anyone else. There was information about those students that they do not need to know, that some of them seem to know, like IEP information. Like, why do you know that? Some of these girls have been empowered to like be tyrants, so that some of the boys in those classrooms can't even breathe, can't even fart without it being reported to the teacher. And they need to chill. You are at school to get your education, honey. You are not at school to monitor what all the boys in this class are doing. And I probably say that as a boy mom whose boys often got in trouble for being boys. And I'm sure it was the girls who were tattling on them. He's doing this. He's out of his seat. He's looking at me. Live your life. That's my message to all of them. When they start doing that, I tell them, go back to your seat, live your life, get your education. Don't worry about what he's doing on the other side of the classroom. As long as it's not affecting you, and it will affect you if you go over there and provoke him. As long as you're in your corner, it's not affecting you. He's not saying or doing anything that is directly affecting your life or is offensive to you or to anyone else. Then leave these boys alone and let them breathe in these classrooms. So I've been to many elementary schools, and there were two that I was in, and they're clearly Title I schools. I think there's a lot of Title I schools in this county, but these two were definitely. There's also a lot of schools that are in very well-to-do neighborhoods with surrounded by nice subdivision, where teachers can leave science experiments for the substitute, knowing that she'll come back and the classroom will be intact. But there are two schools that I went to. Nicest schools, nicest kids. I do like these two schools, but I've noticed that there's a food giveaway on Fridays, these black bags. And I asked a faculty member, staff member at one of the schools, what's this food thing? Is it the county? He said, and he explained to me that it's a local businessman who has a big warehouse behind his car business, where I think it's like a car repair, car sales business, where he has a food collection. And that food collection gets bagged up and taken to schools. And on Fridays, it gets given to kids who need it, who need food for the weekend. Because if you think about it, kids get free breakfast. Some kids not all kids, but some kids get free lunch. But I know here in Florida, everyone gets free breakfast. But the truth is that when some kids go home, like that's the meal. That's the meal for the day, the breakfast and the lunch. And then at the weekend, perhaps nothing. Not necessarily because there's neglect, but because there's poverty. And the way the economy is right now, there's a lot of people who should be comfortable, but they're not, because everything's gone up except for wages. Everything has gone up. If you're trying to raise kids and feed them, food has gone up. Electricity's gone up. All of our bills have gone up, but people's wages have not. So I can see how people who before would have been okay, comfortable, who are now in a situation where that is not the case. But with these distributions bags, I was just thinking, how does this work? Is there like a stigma attached to it? Because when I was growing up, it would have been like the kids who get the black bags, and that would have been like a source of ridicule and a stigma. So I was just wondering, I hope it's not like that. Like, how do they make it so it's not like that? Well, I actually got to experience the distribution on last week on a Friday. Um, there was a girl who took charge of the distribution. She was one of those girls who, well, she actually wasn't one like that, but she's a very nice girl. I've had her before in that school. I've taught her before. Um, but she wasn't one of those girls who believes she's the teacher. But when it was time for the distribution, she said, "Let me see the list." And an adult came around, bought some black bags and a list. And I didn't want to show the girl a list because I felt the list was like, I don't want her to see who has the black bags. It's kind of silly because you'll know who has the black bags because you see them being handed to them. So it didn't really make any sense. But anyway, so she was like, "No, let me help you. Let me help you." Well, her name is on the list. So she was like, "Okay, this person's not here. This person's here." So she helped me distribute the bags to it was like 7 or 8 kids, maybe like 10 kids or something in the class, who were getting the black bags, but some of them were not here. And I was just wondering, how does this work so it's not a stigma? So there's not a stigma attached to it, because you know how kids can be cruel, to each other. But anyway, she was passing them out, and then quite a few kids had signed out or were absent that day, so there were leftovers. And then this is when I just felt so happy that there was clearly no stigma attached to this food giveaway, because she said, "Okay," she said to me, I said, "What happens to all these leftovers?" She said, "It just, because people were absent, remember." She said, it just gets given out to whoever wants it. I said, "Okay." She said, "Let me do it." I said, "Okay." And she said, "Who wants the black bag?" And I'm thinking that kids might be a little standoffish. Well, because I also asked her, "How do kids get their names on the list?" Because I was wondering in my head, is it by whoever gets free school meals, or is it like a parent sign up? She said, "Oh, whoever signs up for it can get it." So then there were leftovers, and one kid made a comment about, "I wish my name was on the list. I'd love one of those bags." And he said it publicly in front of his classmates. And then when there was leftovers, she started telling them about who wants a bag, and people were raising their hands, like raising their me. And she started passing them out to whoever raised their hands. And then there was 2 left, and there was like 3 people who wanted them. And so then so one of them was like, "But I want one too." And she said, "But if I give you this, I won't have one. I'm supposed to get one." So I thought that was really cool, because that means there's no stigma attached to this. People are like raising their hand and saying, "I'm not on the list, but I want one. I'll take one." I thought that was really cool. And she even said, "Hey, I'm not going to give you mine. I need to get one too, unfortunately." But they passed it out in a very amicable way. And when I was actually walking them out for dismissal, I saw more bags on a cart. So I think it's possible that they still have more, if there are maybe from kids who are absent. They still have more if there are other kids who want them. But I just love what this businessman is doing. God bless him. God bless his business and his family. He's really feeling a need. And I just love that the bags are being given away in a way that there's no stigma attached to them. I actually wanted to know what was inside. So I did ask the kid, "Hey, can I see inside there?" And I saw some ramen noodles, some cookies, like granola bar. I don't remember what else, but it was definitely enough food that, especially the ramen, like the ones where it's like a tub and you pour water inside it, a cup of noodles or something, where you know that, especially at this age, when they're so young, that even if there isn't food in the home, they're going to be okay for the weekend. So that's good to know. Yeah, so I think the food bags are such a blessing, and I'm so happy that not only is there no stigma attached to it, but people are proud to get them, which makes sense in this economy. It really does. So yeah, that was my week of substitute teaching. Thanks for tuning in. Bye. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Education Today. We'll be back next time with more current topics on all things education. In the meantime, you can email any questions or comments you have about the show to edtodaypodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please hit the subscribe button and consider leaving a review on whichever platform you are listening. We are listener supported, so if you are able to give a one-time or monthly donation, check out the show notes for ways in which you can give. Check out my blog for more about my experiences in education at medium.com/@SOKO. That's medium.com/@SOHKOR. You can also find me on Instagram at @SOKO_rights. That's @SOHKOR_rights. See you next time, and thank you again for listening.